want to congratulate him. Was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine.
The history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together. And
I won't say this about Mark, but I didn't like his predecessor. I didn't like a person that worked for. She was terrible.
Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever.
I say never. I've had many things that were not doable, and they ended up being doable, and only doable in a very friendly way.
Have you asked the president to stop calling Canada the 51st state?
Yes. Today.
Okay, specifically, what did you ask him?
Exactly what you just said.
The highlights there from that high-stakes and long-awaited meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump. Welcome back to a special edition of Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos, live in Washington this evening. We've got a lot to talk about with our front bench. With me tonight, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former federal Conservative Cabinet Minister and MP Monty Solberg is here. He is the CEO of U.S. Public Affairs. And CTV News political analyst and former leader of the federal NDP, Tom Mulcair, rounds us out this evening. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. Thank you for making the time. Brian, I'll start with you because so much is being made about the fact that Donald Trump didn't call the Prime Minister governor, that he didn't seem to openly disparage him, that he wasn't, quote unquote, Zelensky'd. How much stock do you place in that?
The bar is pretty low in terms of judging the president and in the way in which he's being respectful or not towards his visitors. So since the bar is pretty low, there's no question that I think anybody watching would say that that went relatively well. Can't stress the word relatively enough, in the sense that the president seemed to be respectful as best as he can be to the prime minister. Certainly from the prime minister and his team's point of view, I'm guessing that in itself is seen as a relief and probably even a win. I know the media is talking a lot about the 51st state angle, as they should, don't get me wrong. But I watched the scrum, I watched the meeting from the Oval Office, and I think Trump just doesn't want to admit that it's a bad idea. He still wants to put it out there, but he definitely made it, I thought, clear in his thinking today that it takes two to tango, and to quote him, and essentially, I think, saying that basically if Canada would want that, then the U.S. would be open to it. So it's a bit of a different positioning and posture that he had in the past. And from that, though, he couldn't help himself, though, right? He obviously went into great detail as to why he thought it would make sense for Canada and that Canada should want to tango. And then the Prime Minister, I thought, did a very good job of interjecting in a very limited capacity at the right times, but very forcefully. And he did so, of course, on those comments and on that topic. So I think he handled it quite well.
If, in fact, Monty, pardon me, let's say the sovereignty issue, and we heard there at the end of that clip, the Prime Minister did tell reporters that he asked the president to stop, talking about Canada as the 51st state. Let's say, for sake of argument, that does become removed. We still face a monumental economic challenge. And we also face somebody who isn't reliable, right? Who signed a trade deal and then contravened it on multiple occasions over the last few months. How problematic is that? Even if we do embark on these negotiations, can we ever really rely on what we get from Trump?
Well, it's definitely problematic. It's always a circus when we're dealing with President Trump. Definitely a political victory for Mark Carney, and saying that Canada is not for sale, and telling the president that he doesn't want Canada to be referred to as the 51st state. That's all great, but the real important thing where the rubber meets the road is on tariffs, and those tariffs remain in place. And there was no real indication that any of that is going to change anytime soon. So in the meantime, Canadian workers are vulnerable to layoffs, and until we get that addressed, we really don't have a real victory. The next step, of course, is to get on to a Canada-U.S. Mexico trade agreement and rework that. But again, the future of that is quite murky, and lots of headlines today, lots of crazy talk. But really, where are we? Have we moved the ball down the road very much at all? I'm just not sure.
even Tom, the idea of those talks being trilateral seems to be dissipating because all of the discussions today were about a bilateral relationship moving forward. So that will be, I guess, one thing to keep our eye on. Your read on how this meeting went and if it's meaningful.
Oh, the meeting was extraordinarily important, and I don't think it could have gone much better for Mr. Carney and for Canada. No question that Donald Trump is always going to be Donald Trump. There were unpredictable things, there were outright lies about subsidizing Canada and so forth. But overall, Trump was able to pass his messages, and Carney was able to do the same. But I think you've zeroed in on the key issue, which is how do we renegotiate a trade deal that is among three partners, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, when Trump is not respecting his own signature on the deal that he wrote and boasted about. Today, he reiterated his line that not only was NAFTA probably the worst trade deal in the history of the United States, it was the worst trade deal in the history of the world, he told us. So that's why he had to renegotiate it. So now he's trying to find some sort of way to justify the fact that he's not respecting so many of its provisions, and it came in this form. He said, well, there was this horrible person, obviously referring to Chrystia Freeland, who was there, and then he stops in the middle of a sentence. You can realize he's sort of thinking, well, I always win negotiations, so I can't say that she won, but I'll say that she was involved and we didn't get it the exact way we wanted. So now we're going to have another deal because that one was just transitional, which is fine if you can get Trump to a place where he can respect his word. And that's where there was a very Sibylline reference by Mark Carney saying, we're going to look at that, but if we're going to come to a deal, it has to be a deal where it's going to be clear that you don't have these outs. Like, how do you don't get to claim that it's fentanyl. You don't get to put a 100% tariff on films made in Canada and say that's national security, because those are the excuses you can find in those agreements. So those are going to have to be worked on. That was signaled somewhat mutedly, but signaled nonetheless by Carney. That's the starting point. You want another deal? Fine. You want to work on it? Fine. There are irritants in there for you? Fine. But we're going to come up with a deal where you can't tear it up page by page the minute you feel like doing so.
I want to ask all three of you about another significant domestic story. Conservative Caucus met in Ottawa today just moments ago. I think because you were all waiting patiently, you heard our interview with Andrew Scheer, who is a former leader of the party and now will act as the, I guess, leader in Parliament. Brian, you know, the last time I think we spoke was very soon after the election, just a week ago. There's been a week since. This is really the first time we're hearing more publicly from Mr. Poilievre. They did vote to adopt the Reform Act, which could potentially include a caucus vote on his leadership. What is your sense of how safe his position as leader of the party is right now?
Well, we spoke about this on the panel last week. I think there was a bit of a consensus of the panelists that he had some great arguments to use as to why he should be given another shot, but we all recognize that past leaders have not been given that opportunity. And of course, it was all made a little more complicated by not having a seat. A week is a long time in politics, and he, I think, has benefited from the idea that there is now a pathway for him, theoretical at this point, but about to become pretty practical, it would seem. And on top of that, the Prime Minister saying that he would call a by-election as early as possible to allow him to get the chance to take a seat in Parliament. So I think that has helped him quite a bit. And of course, I was thinking about it over the last few days. I mean, there's no question that he has, again, a lot of statistics that he can use to sort of bolster his argument. And we've heard that from Scheer and from Poilievre himself this morning. And those are fair comments. I think also the base of the party is very much behind Poilievre and probably very emphatic, right? They're very sort of keen to support him. And I think we saw that during the campaign. We were all a little confused because the polling had the Liberals ahead, but he had these sort of huge rallies with lots of supporters all jazzed up. So I think I've been thinking about that. And over the last few days, I'm sure as caucus members in the Conservative Party spoke to people in their ridings, a lot of Conservative organizers are supportive of Poilievre. So I think he has a good shot. And I think the pathway of having a seat is going to be very helpful. On a side note, it was interesting to see Scheer not say the words leader of the opposition. I mean, that's what he is. He's going to serve as the leader of the opposition. So it's very interesting. And I don't know as to why they think that would be a big issue. But nevertheless, I think the pathway is there for him. Nothing is a certainty, but we should know more over the next few days.
I've just got exactly 2 minutes left. I hope to divide it equally between you, Monty, and Tom. Monty, do you think he'll stick around?
Yeah, I think Pierre Poilievre is in this for the long run. But it's not going to be easy. You've got a new prime minister in place, and the circumstances have changed. And I know, Vashi, you were trying to get at that. I think it's probably quite likely we'll see a bump in the polls for Mark Carney after today's, pretty successful visit to Washington. And so how do you maintain control over your caucus in the months ahead when maybe the prospects aren't quite as rosy as they were under Justin Trudeau? I think that's going to be his long-term challenge.
Last word to you, Tom.
I think one of the reasons, to answer Brian's question, that he's not using the title leader of the opposition is that comes with Stornoway. So as long as Poilievre is the leader of the party, he can argue that he gets to keep Stornoway until he gets in. It is very gentlemanly and high road on the part of Mark Carney to say, no political games, I'm going to give him his by-election as soon as he wants. There might also be a little bit of strategy involved in that as well. I can't see any reason why the Liberals would want to get rid of Pierre Poilievre rapidly, and that could turn things around for them. We'll see whether or not they put in the Reform Act, Michael Chong's bill, and give themselves within caucus the power to review the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. And I think it would be appropriate for both Mr. Scheer and Mr. Poilievre to start mentioning the fact that it's the members of the party under the constitution of the Conservative Party who get to vote on whether or not he continues. They keep saying, no, he's staying. No, he's decided to stay. He's decided. I know more than most political folks about letting the party members decide and how that can go. So I think that they should have the modesty to keep referencing the fact that it's the members of the Conservative Party who have the final say in all of that.
I'll leave it on that note. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the discussion this evening. Brian Gallant, Monty Solberg, and Tom Mulcair, our front bench.